6 Premier League titles in the last 7 years. They are, without a doubt, the most successful English club of the modern era. But hanging over all of that incredible success, 115 charges of financial rule violations. Look, this could very well be the most consequential legal case in football history. So let's dive into this explainer. Today, we're going to break down what Manchester City are actually accused of, and crucially, what the realistic outcomes really look like. But you know what's really ominous about this whole situation? It's the sheer amount of time that's passed. I mean, it has been over 1,247 days since these charges were officially filed by the Premier League. And despite a massive, highly secretive 12-week hearing that finally wrapped up in December 2024, we still have no verdict. Think about that. Pep Guardiola has literally left the club, and the legal verdict on the dynasty he built still hasn't arrived. That endless wait has become just as central to this story as the charges themselves. Now, before we really get into the weeds here, a quick heads up. Stick around, because at about minute 7 of this explainer, we are going to reveal the realistic punishment scenarios. And spoiler alert, the actual likely outcome sits in a much narrower legal band than those wild rumors of immediate relegation or total exoneration you're probably seeing online. We'll break down exactly what. All right, let's get right into Section 1. Decoding the 11-5 charges. What are they actually accused of? Because honestly, almost nobody who shouts 115 online actually knows what makes up that number. So let's break it down. These charges cover a massive 9-year window, stretching from the 2009-2010 season all the way to 2017-2018. And they're split into 5 distinct categories. As you can see, the vast majority, 54 of them, are for failing to provide accurate financial information. That is the core accusation. Then you've got 14 charges for hiding manager pay, 7 for breaching the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules, and 5 for UEFA's financial fair play. But I want you to pay really close attention to that slice right there. 35 charges for failing to cooperate with the investigation. Those 35 non-cooperation charges, they matter immensely. In fact, they might just be the hardest thing for City to explain away. Why? Well, there's a pretty massive precedent. When the Court of Arbitration for Sport controversially overturned UEFA's 2-year European ban on City back in 2020, they still found that the club had obstructed the investigation. They explicitly upheld a €10 million fine specifically for non-cooperation. So legal experts looking at this current Premier League case see that nearly a third of all the charges already have a clear, documented precedent going against the club. Which brings us to Section 2, the alleged scheme, focusing on inflated sponsorships and hidden costs. So, where did all of these accusations actually come from? They all trace back to November 2018, when Der Spiegel published a massive leak of internal documents known as football leaks. To understand the alleged scheme here, we have to look at how financial fair play actually functions. Direct cash injections from ultra-rich owners? Banned. You can't use them to balance the books. But independent commercial sponsorship money? Totally allowed. The Premier League's theory is essentially that Manchester City bypassed this rule by disguising direct owner money as independent commercial revenue. The most famous example from those leaked emails involves the Etihad Airways sponsorship. According to the leaks, out of a headline figure reported to be around £67.5 million a year, only a tiny fraction, about £8 million, actually came from the airline itself. The core allegation is that the rest of that money was funded directly by City's ownership in Abu Dhabi. Now, it is extremely important to note here that Manchester City completely denies this, and they maintain they have a comprehensive, irrefutable body of evidence to prove their innocence. But the allegations don't just stop at inflating revenue. They also involve hiding costs. For example, it's alleged that former manager Roberto Mancini received an extra £1.75 million a year through a secret consultancy agreement with Al Jazeera, which is another club based in Abu Dhabi. If that's true, it means his actual, true cost to Manchester City was never fully reported in the club's official accounts. And when you combine allegedly inflated revenues on one side with allegedly hidden costs on the other, across a 9-year period, you get a financial picture that is fundamentally completely different from reality. Now, if you stop right there, you'd probably assume this is a completely open and shut case, right? You've got leaked emails, clear rule structures, massive financial discrepancies. But hold on. That is definitely not the whole story, because Manchester City's legal defense actually has a financial accounting argument that's incredibly sophisticated. Let's dive into Section 3, City's 3-part defense, and why this case isn't so simple. City isn't just walking into this hearing saying, nope, we didn't do it. Led by formidable barristers like Lord Panic, they're relying on 3 remarkably strong legal pillars. Number 1, valuation, not fraud. City argues this whole thing is just a disagreement over subjective accounting methodology, not deliberate deception. Fair market value in football is highly subjective. You can have two experts look at the exact same sponsorship deal and land tens of millions of pounds apart. Number 2, stolen and incomplete evidence. They argue that the football leaks are out of context, stolen drafts, and a draft email isn't actual proof that a theoretical structure was ever executed. And number 3, time limits. A lot of these alleged offenses are incredibly old. That's the exact limitation argument that successfully saved City at the Court of Arbitration for Sport in 2020. Okay, here we are at Section 4, the realistic outcomes, where we separate the fact from the fiction. So based on actual legal realities, if the independent commission does return a guilty verdict, what does the punishment realistically look like? Well, the spectrum is quite narrow. Expulsion from the league? Technically possible, but effectively off the table because of massive external litigation and broadcast contracts. Retroactive title stripping? It's practically impossible to cleanly unwind a full decade of sporting history. A simple fine? Completely politically unviable as a deterrent against a state-backed club. So that leaves a points deduction as the true center of gravity here, coupled with a very high likelihood of a split verdict. And if we're looking at recent precedents, we definitely have to talk about points deductions. We recently saw Everton get a 10-point deduction, which was reduced to 6 on appeal, and Nottingham Forest received a 4-point deduction. But unlike those clubs who had relatively straightforward breaches, City's alleged scheme spans 9 whole years and includes those 35 non-cooperation charges as a massive aggravating factor. Because of that, legal analysts suggest this would demand a significantly larger, totally unprecedented points deduction. And critically, that deduction would hit the current active season when the final verdict is reached, not applied retroactively to past seasons. Taking all of this into account, experts agreed that the single most realistic outcome is a split verdict. Because City's defense on time limits and subjective valuation is so strong, they could realistically be cleared or time-barred on the core financial accuracy charges, but found guilty on those 35 non-cooperation charges. That is exactly what happened at CAS in 2020. This would likely trigger a hefty points deduction. But remember, whatever the independent commission decides, both sides have the right to immediately appeal to a Premier League appeals board. So the day the verdict drops isn't the end of the story. It's really just the start of the next legal phase. Finally, Section 5, the governance fallout, the Premier League's existential crisis. Stepping back from Manchester City for a second, we really have to look at the collateral damage here. The sheer 3.5-year delay has created glaring inconsistencies, especially when other clubs are being punished so quickly. It's already forced this messy rewrite of the league's associated party rules, and it's accelerated the arrival of a government-backed independent football regulator in the UK. Ultimately, the Premier League is facing an existential crisis. If City wins, it essentially proves the financial rules are completely unenforceable against ultra-rich, state-backed ownership. But if they lose, a decade of sporting history and beloved trophies are retroactively devalued. There is simply no outcome here that leaves the Premier League's authority completely intact. Look, this case is absolutely going to fundamentally shape the future of the sport. So, based on the evidence and the precedents we've outlined today, if Manchester City are found guilty on a meaningful share of these 115 charges, what do you think the specific punishment should be? Drop a specific number of deducted points in the comments below. We're going to read through them and feature the best arguments in our follow-up explainer the exact moment the verdict finally lands. Thanks so much for watching.